Good morning or good evening. I hope you're all well. Welcome to the Voices of Sustainability virtual fireside chat series. I'm Tatiana Antonelli Abella, founder and managing director at Gumbuk, a social enterprise focused on accelerating sustainability and climate action in the UAE and beyond. The Zayed Sustainability Prize was established in 2008 as the United Arab Emirates Pioneering Global Award for recognizing organizations and high schools for their sustainable, innovative, and humanitarian solutions. Today, the prize counts 15 years of global impact with 378 million people around the world benefiting from its winner solutions across the categories of health, food, energy, water, climate action, and global high schools. In today's episode, we will delve into the topic of jobs of the future. But first, I would like to introduce you to our guests. Richard Watson is the founder of Now and Next and Futurists in Residence Entrepreneurship Center at Cambridge University, and Angela Oguntala is a founding partner at Grayspace. Our conversation today will begin with a brief discussion on exactly what the jobs of the future are, how to prepare for them, and what their impact will be on both the world and humanity. Richard, as a specialist in strategic foresight, horizon scanning, and global trends, what will the jobs of the future look like, and how different do you envision them to be from the present?
Well, the most obvious thing to say is that I don't know. We just don't know. We also need to define what we mean by future. Do we mean next year, 5 years, 50 years? And obviously, the further into the future we go, the more difficult it gets. The other thing I'd say is that there seems to be a lot of discussion about, what jobs are going to be destroyed, what are the new jobs, and again, we don't know. And I think possibly another way of looking at this, of discussing this, is, what do we want the jobs of the future to be? We are in control ultimately of all of this technology at the moment, and if we do not want it doing certain jobs, it's within our power to prevent its encroachment. So it's extremely difficult to answer the question at any kind of granular level. We can, I suppose, speculate that anything that is repetitive, rote, formulaic, there's a reasonable probability that it's going to either disappear or it will be heavily augmented by automation, AI systems, and so on. And equally, I think you can be generally pretty certain that anything that an AI can't do or a robot can't do will probably remain fairly safe. And there are certain things. Anything that involves inspiring other people, managing, motivating other people, very high levels of creativity are probably safe, empathy, compassion, and also any job that's different every time you do it. So it would be very hard to automate a plumber, or any job that involves high levels of human interaction. So I'm thinking, for example, of a hairdresser. There is a hairdressing robot. I've seen it. It's not, I can't see it happening. I really can't. So yeah, I think we have to swing back to, what do we want the future to look like, and then sort of build backwards from there.
It sounds from what you're saying that we're talking about skills that are either related to creativity but also maybe lower skills. Last year at the Future Forum in Dubai, we had Dr. Mikio Kaku, who came and had a session, and he was talking about future sources of wealth, and he was really highlighting, for example, science, innovation, technology, in order to ensure the best future for humanity. But he was also mentioning how technology would become part of our own bodies. It will be embedded in us and not just something that next to us or that we're using separately. How do you see that?
That's certainly possible. There's a great quote by an American evolutionary biologist called Edward O. Wilson, who died quite recently, the Ant-Man, he was known as, and he said something to the effect of us having the brains of the Paleolithic, the institutions of the medieval, and the technology of the gods. And his point was it was a rather uneasy relationship. And the fundamental problem is that we have technology, particularly computing, but also things like genomics that are, I mean, I'm a skeptic about exponentials, but if it's not exponential, it's certainly very, very rapid growth. Our brains, there's a limit to what we can cope with. I mean, I know our brains are plastic, but our fundamental architecture hasn't changed since we crawled out of a cave. So we have a number of choices going forward. One scenario is we start to reject this technology or push it back. I mean, to some extent, we're all living, I think, in a state of future shock at the moment because it's all moving too fast. Not for everybody. I mean, there are generational overlays, there are cultural overlays, but it is moving very, very fast. So we can either push back and reject some of this, or as you said just then, we start incorporating this technology into our bodies to cope with the technology. I mean, I'm struggling to think of a third scenario unless you want to get very science fictiony and we just sort of dispense with our bodies altogether and we just become data. But we'll leave that for a Black Mirror episode or something. So yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. Although that's not happening next Tuesday. Obviously, that is decades away, if not more. Thank you,
Angela. From your point of view, you help organizations innovate for a world in transition. So I'm sure there's a lot of research behind into all the efforts to forecast what the future job market will look like and what type of jobs will be in demand. Would you like to add anything to what just Richard said?
Well, I am, and this is actually a rarity, but I'm incredibly aligned with what he said. So I think you really have to define when you're thinking about what does it mean to practice, to be a foresight practitioner, to think about the future. For a lot of people, it is about prediction and forecasting. For us, a lot of our work is about trying to understand what is broken in the present in society and for the organizations we work with, what desirable futures, what bigger alternatives, what kind of impact do we want? If this is what is broken, then what do we want to see instead? So really understanding that question when it comes to the future of work and future jobs. What do we want? What should humans do? What do we want to build? And then the innovation part is trying to find those new ideas and new opportunities to move towards that larger future. So when it comes to the work we do and the research that we do, it's often in thinking about these different horizons of time, the present, the future, and the transition, and trying to negotiate amongst them rather than trying to find this expected future, which never shows up. The expected future, the ideas we have about what it will be like, it never comes to be anyway. So that's not necessarily the route that we take when we are thinking about future jobs or the future of education or the future of anything. It's more so about how do we equip these organizations and leaders and teams and workers and people with the kind of mindsets and skills so that they feel empowered to shape the futures that they want, and so that they feel empowered to push against when they see things emerging, when they see things happening where we're like, this is not in our benefit. I don't want this. And realizing that for me, I also think that's a fundamental aspect of optimism, to be optimistic about the future by first saying, we don't want that. Like this is broken. We don't want that. And we're going to work to shape things differently.
Can I come in there? Because I think that's a really important point. I mean, first of all, it's not really binary, because a lot of this, it's not going to remove things completely. It's a question of working with the technology in a lot of cases. But I think the broader point that you touched on there that's hugely important about, we don't want this, is a lot of, the expected future, which is all very techy, and it's full of AI and quantum and brain machine interfaces and smart energy grids and what have you. This is, as far as I understand it, being designed by a very, very small slice of global society. Less than 1% of the world is designing this stuff. And broadly, they are young white men in Silicon Valley and a few areas of China and a few other places. And it kind of suits them, but it doesn't suit everybody else necessarily. And also a lot of this stuff, unless we have some extraordinary breakthrough, is inherently unsustainable. And a lot of the solutions to the problems we have seem to be very high tech, when actually we could achieve more potentially with attitudinal and behavioral change. Now, and some people would say, well, that's like going backwards. That's like putting your washing on the line instead of a sort of smart dryer connected to a smart energy hub. So, You know, and that's again, there's a bit of a sort of choice here between, there's a sort of section of society, the global society, rushing forward into this sort of sci-fi future, which, you know, fine. But then I would love to know how many people are thinking, actually, that doesn't really suit me. And we are constrained by some very basic stuff. I mean, there is only so much copper we can get out of the ground. You know, we're hearing stories, you know, now about, you know, accessibility of lithium, and, you know, self-driving cars, EVs, they all come at a cost. So it's all a question of sort of making choices and getting balances in society.
That's very interesting, because both of you bring out a very important element, the element of choice. When you say, I don't want this, or we don't want this, and what you just said, right? We need to choose on these solutions. Are they the right ones for our society, and which society? Because again, we're so diverse around the world with so many different challenges to face. In terms of sustainability, of course, we're looking at how feasible this is, but like Her Excellency Razana Mubarak said, you know, in her speech, also the road to COP, and how we're dealing with climate change, for example. It's true that we are also looking at the indigenous population. So this is where we need to understand, how do we balance that back to nature, respect for nature, indigenous population, and then this advance in technology. But again, we have a huge amount of youth now looking at, you know, future careers and trying to understand what they can do. Of course, everyone is looking at the one that's more profitable. The high pay is always not, you know, one of the top demands. So one of the next questions that I actually have for you, Richard, is which sectors do you think or do you expect to continue offering high quality, high paying employment, in contrast to those which may see a reduction in jobs? Because this is also where we're going to have a big dilemma.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, well, the first thing you've touched on it there is, you know, the world is not a homogenous place. So you have a very youthful population in UAE, and one of your challenges is to make sure everyone's got a job. And the same is going to be true in sub-Saharan Africa going forward. Large parts of the rest of the world, that's just not true. You look at Japan, you look at China, interestingly, you look at Europe. These societies are aging very, very rapidly. And a lot of automation and AI is about keeping an elderly population mobile, connected, and healthy. And, you know, so there's very, very different contexts. I mean, I think, you know, again, you've got to look at what AI can't do. So yes, there are a load of jobs in STEM. So anything that's sort of maths, data science, robotics, design, genetics, anything techie, 100%. Although there are jobs for philosophers in these companies as well, because I think ethics is going to become increasingly important. So yes, you can do it, but should you do it? And having those discussions. And then anything that involves, you know, human interaction, human understanding, interpersonal relationships, empathy, curiosity, creativity. So broadly, the humanities, I mean, media, the arts, although I think a lot of these organizations going forward will work best when they have a combination of those two types of brains. I mean, nurses, teachers. I mean, yes, we can completely get rid of teachers and nurses and doctors. That's entirely feasible. And arguably, you'll get a better result with a one-to-one tuition with a machine or with a robotic surgeon than you will with a human being. But I'm not sure most people want that. And again, that would probably be an example of technology enhancing the human experience, not replacing it altogether. And in terms of actually sort of motivating and managing people, you know, lawyers, yes, low-end law is probably going to get automated, but the high-end stuff, the criminal stuff, the high-end corporate stuff, that is to do with personal human relationships. That is to do with persuading a client to do something they don't want to do, or persuading a judge or a jury to do something. And that's extraordinarily difficult to automate. You know, everyone thinks law is easy to automate because it's a rule-based system, it's case law. Not true, because there are people involved. I mean, anywhere where any job that involves a high degree of human interaction, I would say was relatively safe.
I agree with this, and I think it's applicable to actually most of jobs, even a doctor. I mean, you really need someone to sit with you and understand what's best for you, also from a mental perspective. Not always what's written as the good and the best option can actually apply to everyone the same way. Angela, what do you believe is the most critical question we need to focus on in order to better understand and shape jobs of the future?
Well, what I think is great about this conversation so far is that we've already been centering it. And I think that the critical questions we need to be asking are likely in sequence, what should people do? So if we know that machines can do a lot, what would we want a human being to do? So really being willing to, in our communities, in our organizations, have that deeper conversation. So coming back to what Richard was saying about teachers. Teachers do more than just imparting knowledge and information. They also cultivate, the critical skills we have as human beings to participate in society, emotional intelligence and critical thinking, especially when we're getting so much, our future supposedly is going to be predicated on always getting the answer from a chatbot. How do we have critical or interesting or creative conversations? And so, of course, teachers have a role in the future. If we think about doctors and nurses and even therapists, will we want that automated compassion? Is that the kind of future we want? And so first we'll have to ask, what should people do? This applies to creativity and journalism and music and books and art. And we see some of that conversation playing out now. We can see it in the Hollywood writer's strike, where they're fighting for some protections against AI, exclusively writing scripts. We can see it in publications coming forward and saying, we're going to limit how we use, for example, generative AI to in journalistic writing, because we believe that these tools should help us as journalists to come up with compelling and accurate stories, and not just, offload this idea of thinking and guidance and perspective to machines. So first we'll have to ask, what should people do? And once we get those answers, whether it is teachers and doctors and therapists and leaders and creatives, and in each of those roles, then we should ask, okay, if this is what we know we want people to do, in what ways can we use these tools, because that's what they are, to support us? And so the idea of usefulness, it starts with us, and then we figure out how can we use these tools to support us. And we might come to the conclusion, similar to what we're doing at Grayspace, where we're trying to, we know we have this slew of new possibilities available to us, for example, with generative AI tools in our innovation process. And we're trying to figure out, okay, if we break down these different stages or activities we have around ideation and coming up with new ideas, around user testing, human-centered research, product and service design, at which points should we start to implement and try and test out these new tools and possibilities? And at which point are we already starting to figure out through our experimentation that these tools don't have a place at this point in human-centered research? We choose, coming back to that notion of choice, that in our processes, this is not meaningful, or maybe it's even harmful, or again, we just choose to have a different approach, a more human-led or more human-first approach. So I think those are the key questions. What should people do, even if a machine can to some degree do it, or even do it very well by certain standards? And once we know what people should do, defining what does desirable human and machine collaboration look like based on our sense of purpose and the kind of future we want.
Do you think that education plays a role in all this? Because I feel I'm from a different generation where I grew up with a lot of human interaction, mainly only human, right? We were using books. We had to talk, we had to meet. I feel, and looking at the way my children are using technology, they expect a lot from technology already. A lot is done for them. And so I wonder if in the future for them, technology is already there. For us, and I put myself in a general group that's a bit older, we suffer because we've been exposed to arts and creativity in a bigger and wider way. Today, creativity is through technology, I feel, and somehow this, I don't know how much technology should be embedded in education. So maybe this is a question to both of you. How can we make sure that we still keep arts education and creativity widely in connection with our youth? Because I feel now it's a privilege to say I'm a screenwriter, I'm an actor, I'm a painter. It's very little, and it's something very, you know, exclusive, not for everyone.
I mean, I can't speak about education systems beyond the UK and to some extent Australia, but it strikes me the model is completely wrong at the moment. We are teaching young people to compete head on with automation and AI systems. It's all about putting stuff in their head, which they memorize and spit out. Now, computers are already rather good at that. And again, we should be teaching people, we need that. I mean, I'm not saying get rid of that, but fundamentally, we need to teach people the very things that these machines and systems can't do in the future. And also, by the way, as was said earlier on, it's about, you know, socialization and getting people to be sort of decent human beings and all that kind of thing. I forgot what else I was going to say then. So it's not doing a very good job there. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say was, you know, it is worrying within the education systems I'm aware of is, yes, you're getting very proficient people coming out of the system, although they are stressed beyond belief in a lot of instances. But it is worrying that they struggle dealing with human beings. And I'm seeing this anecdotally with people that are hiring people aged 21, 22 that are technically brilliant, that have the most extraordinary CVs, and they get hired immediately and they do incredibly well for 2 or 3 years. And because they do so well, they get promoted. And at that point, they either have to sell or they have to manage teams of other people. And they can't do either of those things because that involves human interaction. And I'm worried that we are creating this world where certainly in the UK, we are removing so many levels of human interaction. And the other thing I'd say just to finally, which doesn't entirely link with this, is, you know, the narrative seems to be coming out of business and the likes of Silicon Valley that don't worry, it'll be fine. You know, we've destroyed jobs before, new jobs are always created. You know, look at the Industrial Revolution. All true, although in the case of the Industrial Revolution, it took about 100 years for things to sort of, you know, they went down, then they came back up again. And conditions were better and pay was better and all the rest of it. So maybe this one is a little bit different. And there's not a lot of data around that I've seen, but the feeling is that the internet is destroying more jobs than it's creating. And the jobs that are being created, I mean, there's obviously some unbelievably fantastic, well-paid jobs with the likes of a DeepMind, Google Brain or whatever. But an awful lot of the jobs are these sort of 0 hours, 0 contract, part-time, you know, sort of, you know, Uber delivery driver type jobs. I shouldn't use Uber because they've changed a bit, but so we really do need to make sure that people have good jobs going forward. And this idea that, oh, it doesn't matter, we'll just give people, you know, the big basic income guarantee, it doesn't matter if millions of people don't have jobs, we'll just give them money, completely misunderstands the role of work in society in my mind. You know, it's not just about the money, it's about community and sort of identity and self-esteem and a bunch of other stuff. So we want to be very careful about destroying jobs at scale.
Agreed. Looks like we're going to become the ones who serve technology rather than...
That's our choice, right?
Exactly. And we see, for example, the EU, we see that there are many ways that we can exercise that choice as a leader in the way we design, deploy certain technologies, as a regulator, as an everyday worker, as a parent, as a teacher. And that is our choice. And I think to your question about creativity, you know, maybe these kids, they're used to using and collaborating with these tools in ways that are different for people that are 10, 20 years older. So if we're aware that they're used to it in certain capacities, then say, yeah, sure, maybe your chatbot does pen an essay for you. And you bring that essay into class, and then you sit around collectively and you discuss, you critique, you unpack what was right, what was wrong, what was problematic, what do you want? And maybe this comes back to that critical thinking, collective imagination, realizing if we do have tools that are going to be deployed in certain ways, we can still try to, again, design things in a certain way from the get-go and deploy them and use them in a certain way, but really say, okay, well, maybe we need some different practices to try to bring in that human connection and that creativity while still saying, of course, we can't like put the genie, like it's here, it's with us. We might have, you know, some instances where we need to use these tools. We know that children are incredibly familiar with them. So how can we rethink and refashion what everyday education looks like to leverage more creativity and more human interaction, so we don't create a society where we don't know how to lead or inspire or interact with each other. And those, I think, are the exact things we will need to shape another future, or to build more sustainable futures, to be able to socialize and mobilize each other to say, hey, I believe another alternative is possible. What might it look like if we collaborated together to move towards that alternative? So I think those skills and that creativity and that social capacity is going to be necessary. We're just going to have to refashion maybe how we think about education to use it in some instances and then pivot towards, yeah, other aspects and other ways of doing things in other instances.
And hopefully we'll have, you know, more data in the next couple of years showing the differences between different educational systems. And maybe one day we'll have a regulatory body who will advise on what's best for our youth. I have a last question for both of you, and a bit of a wrap up. I don't know if you're aware, this year, 2023 in the UAE, we are in the year of sustainability. And so I would like to ask each one of you to share one word on how you would describe the future of sustainability.
Picking one's a bit tricky. I mean, I would probably go for challenging. I mean, I'm tempted to say water, which is I'm very interested in water going forward, but you know, I'll stick with challenging.
Well, water is a big challenge, so. Angela?
And I touched on optimism when we started, and I think that my word is going to be conditionality. I don't even know if that's a word. But I really like when thinking about optimism that there are two ways to position it. You can either be complacent in your optimism, or you can be conditional in your optimism. And complacency is, of course, just saying things will get better, don't worry about it, waiting for some future to happen. And conditional optimism is like, yeah, things might get better, but what is it going to take for me and others around me to, again, socialize, mobilize, inspire, motivate others to move towards new possibilities or different options. So when I think about building sustainable futures, I think it's going to be conditional on that understanding of our agency and the roles we play, and that none of this is going to happen if we don't accept that agency and also be willing to make some trade-offs.
I like that. We definitely need some action, and we need to make some sacrifices, and we cannot have it all. That's for sure. Thank you very much. I think something I really like from this session today is a common message of collaboration and coming together as a society, as a community, and having a choice. I think we always had a lot of choice, but somehow we never knew the consequences of our choices. And today there's so much out there and so much data that really we can take better choices for sure. So thank you, Angela and Richard, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise. I'm sure your valuable insights highlighted new directions for individuals, but also for organizations to envision alternatives through future thinking. I would also like to thank our audience for tuning in. If anyone would like to watch again the entire session or share it with their communities and friends, the episode will be posted on the Zayed Sustainability Prize YouTube channel. So I thank you again very much, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Take care. Bye, everyone.